I am Edward Mitchell. I'm 81 years old, and I need to tell you something that's been weighing on my heart for 60 years. This isn't going to be an easy story to hear. Hell, it hasn't been easy to live. Some of you will judge me. Some of you will call me a cheater, a liar, maybe worse. But I'm at the end of my life now, and I've learned that the truth matters more than comfort. This is a story about loving two women, about living a double life, not in the way you might think, but in here, in my heart. This is about Catherine Rose Bennett, the girl I met when I was 21 years old, the girl who disappeared from my life and haunted me for 6 decades. And this is about Margaret, my wife of 48 years, a woman I loved deeply and faithfully until the day she died. You're probably thinking, how can both those things be true? That's what I've been asking myself my entire adult life. So sit with me for a while, let me tell you everything, and then you can decide what kind of man I really am. Boston, July 1965. I was 21 years old, and I thought I knew everything. I was working at my father's hardware store during the summer before my final year of college. It was honest work, but boring as hell. Day after day of selling screws and paint and listening to my father complain about the damn hippies protesting the war. July 14th, a Wednesday. That's the day everything changed. She walked through that door, and I swear to God, time stopped. I know how that sounds, like some cheap romance novel, but it's the truth. She was wearing a yellow sundress with white flowers on it. Her hair was dark brown, almost black, and it caught the sunlight coming through our front window in a way that made her look like she was glowing. I was up on a ladder, restocking nails. When I saw her, I turned too fast and knocked the entire box off the shelf. Hundreds of nails, just cascading down, hitting the floor like rain on a tin roof. The noise was deafening. I wanted to die right there. But she laughed, not at me, but with me. This genuine musical laugh that made me start laughing too, even though I was mortified. She bent down in that yellow dress and started helping me pick up nails, and our hands touched. I felt it. I know you're not supposed to believe in that kind of thing, love at first sight, soulmates, all that romantic nonsense, but I felt something I'd never felt before, like my soul recognized hers, like I'd been waiting my whole life for that exact moment. Her name was Catherine Rose Bennett, 20 years old, visiting from Philadelphia to stay with her aunt for the summer. She needed picture frame hooks. That's what she came in for. Picture frame hooks that probably cost 50 cents. I spent 45 minutes helping her find the perfect ones. I showed her every type we had. I explained the weight ratings, the wall materials they worked best with, installation techniques. I knew I was being ridiculous. She knew it too. But neither of us wanted her to leave. Before she walked out that door, I did something I'd never done before. I was shy back then. Hard to believe now, but I was. I asked her if she liked coffee. She tilted her head and said, I like the idea of coffee more than coffee itself. I had no idea what that meant. Still don't, really. But I said, would you like to explore that idea with me? And she smiled. God, that smile. And she said yes. That was it. That was the moment my life split into 2 timelines, before Catherine and everything after. We met the next day at a little cafe near the Common. I got there 30 minutes early because I was terrified she wouldn't show up. But she did. She wore a blue dress that time, and she'd done something different with her hair. We ordered coffee. She put so much cream and sugar in hers that it barely qualified as coffee anymore. And we talked. We talked for 4 hours that first day, about everything. She wanted to be a writer. She'd just finished her sophomore year at Bryn Mawr, studying literature. She told me about the novel she was working on, about how she saw colors more vividly when she was happy, about how she felt like she was living in the wrong era, that she should have been born in the 1920s in Paris, sitting in cafes with Hemingway and Fitzgerald. I told her about engineering, about how I loved the precision of math, the certainty of physics, how I wanted to build bridges that would stand for centuries. She said that was beautiful, that bridges were metaphors, connections between separated things. She made everything sound poetic. We were inseparable after that. Every single day that summer, I'd finish work and pick her up at her aunt's house in my beat-up '58 Chevrolet. The car was a piece of junk, the muffler was loud, radio only picked up one station, and it smelled like motor oil. But she'd get in that car like it was a Rolls-Royce, and we'd drive. We went everywhere. The harbor, the public garden, Little Italian, restaurants in the North End, where they served wine to anybody who looked vaguely old enough. We'd park by the Charles River and watch the sunset. She'd read me passages from the books she loved, Fitzgerald, Woolf, Salinger. I'd pretend to understand the deeper meanings, but honestly, I was just listening to her voice. One night, it was August 3rd, I'll never forget. We were sitting on our bench overlooking the river. She was eating strawberry ice cream that kept dripping onto her hand, and she was laughing at herself for being messy. And I kissed her. She tasted like strawberries and summer and everything good in the world. When we pulled apart, she looked at me with these wide eyes and said, "I think I'm falling in love with you, Edward Mitchell." I said, "I think I fell in love with you the moment you helped me pick up those nails." She cried. "Happy tears," she said. She told me that day that she saw colors more intensely when she was truly happy, and that everything, the water, the sky, the trees, looked impossibly bright. I was 21 years old, and I was absolutely certain that I would marry this girl, that we'd have a life together, that I'd build her a house with big windows so she could see all those vivid colors, that we'd grow old together. I was so certain, but I was also very, very wrong. August 19th, 1965, 3 weeks before I was supposed to go back to school. 3 weeks before Catherine was supposed to return to Philadelphia and finish her own degree. We'd made all these plans. I'd visit her during Thanksgiving. She'd come to Boston for Christmas. We'd make it work. Then the telegram came. Catherine's father had a massive heart attack. He was only 47 years old. 1 minute he was fine, eating breakfast. The next minute he was on the floor, not breathing. Her mother found him. Catherine got the call from her aunt. I was there when it happened. I watched her face change, watched the color drain out of it. She dropped the phone, just let it fall, and dangled there by its cord, and she couldn't speak. I held her while she cried. Her father survived, but barely. The doctors said he'd need months of recovery. He was partially paralyzed on his left side. He couldn't work. And Catherine's mother. God, I felt sorry for that woman. She had 3 other kids at home. The youngest was only 8 years old. Catherine had to leave immediately. There was a train the next morning. We had one last night, together. I picked her up at her aunt's house at sunset, and we drove to our bench by the river. We didn't talk much at first. We just sat there, holding each other, watching the water. I gave her my class ring. It was this stupid gold-plated thing with a red stone that wasn't even a real ruby. But I took it off my finger, and put it in her hand and said, "This means you're mine, and I'm yours, no matter what, no matter how far apart we are." She cried so hard. She said, "Nothing could keep me away from you, Edward. Not distance, not time, not anything. I promise." I believed her. God help me, I believed her with everything I had. She gave me something, too, this little yellow flower hair clip she always wore. She tucked it into my shirt pocket and said, "Keep this close to your heart, and every time you look at it, know that I'm thinking about you." The next morning, I drove her to South Station. I carried her suitcase. I walked her to the platform. We stood there, holding each other, and she was shaking. I told her everything would be okay, that her father would recover, that we'd see each other soon. When the conductor called for boarding, she kissed me one last time. She said, "I love you, Edward Mitchell. I'll love you forever." And then she got on that train, and I watched it pull away until I couldn't see it any more. I went back to school, started my senior year, and Catherine went home to Philadelphia to take care of her family. And we wrote letters. God, those letters! I saved every single one. I still have them, actually, in a box in my closet. Long, passionate letters about our future together. She'd tell me about her father's progress, about the books she was reading, about how much she missed me. She'd send pressed flowers from her mother's garden. She signed every letter, "Yours eternally, Catherine Rose." I wrote back just as often, told her about my classes, about how boring life was without her, about the house I was going to build for us someday. I saved every penny I earned from part-time work, planning to visit her during Thanksgiving break. But then October came and something changed. The letters started arriving less frequently. Once a day became every other day, then once a week. And when they did come, they were shorter, distant, like she was writing to an acquaintance, not the man she loved. I asked her what was wrong. She said nothing was wrong, that she was just busy with her father's care. But I could feel it. You know when someone's pulling away from you. You can feel it in your bones, even across hundreds of miles. I started to panic. I called her, long distance, which cost a fortune back then. Her mother always answered, always had some excuse for why Catherine couldn't come to the phone. She's at the hospital. She's with the neighbors. She's sleeping. After a while, I started to wonder if her mother was even telling her I'd called. November 12th, 1965. That's the day I got the letter that destroyed me. It was short, just half a page. Catherine wrote that she needed time, that she was confused, that the distance was too hard, that she needed to focus on her family. She said she still loved me, but that love wasn't always enough, and she sent my ring back. She put it in the envelope, wrapped in tissue paper, and sent it back to me. But she kept the hair clip. She asked me not to write any more. I read that letter maybe 100 times, trying to understand what I'd done wrong, trying to figure out where I'd failed her. I was 21 years old, and I felt like my chest had been cracked open. I stopped going to classes. I'd just sit in my dorm room, staring at that letter, at that ring. My roommate, Dave Brennan, good guy, he got worried. He'd find me sitting by the window at 3 in the morning, just staring out at nothing. My grades plummeted. I went from A's to D's in a matter of weeks. I didn't care. Nothing seemed to matter if Catherine was gone. And then I did something I've regretted for 60 years. I wrote her back. One final letter, and it was cruel. I told her that if she could walk away so easily, then maybe what we had wasn't real. Maybe it was just a summer fantasy, and I'd been stupid to think it was more. I told her I was done waiting for someone who clearly didn't want me. I told her to have a nice life. I was 21 years old and heartbroken, and I wanted her to hurt the way I was hurting. I wanted her to feel the pain I felt every single day. So I wrote those words, those terrible, spiteful words, and I sent them. I never got a response. Nothing. Not a word. And that, somehow, hurt even more than her goodbye letter. I convinced myself that proved I was right, that she didn't care, that she'd moved on and forgotten me as easily as she'd claimed to love me. I forced myself to move on. I graduated, barely, in 1966. I took a job in New York with an engineering firm. I dated other women. I went to parties. I did everything I was supposed to do to be a normal 22-year-old guy. But late at night, alone in my apartment, I'd think about her, wonder where she was, wonder if she ever thought about me, wonder what had really happened between us. I kept that yellow flower hair clip. I told myself I should throw it away, but I couldn't. I'd put it in a drawer, then take it out, put it in a box, then retrieve it. Finally, I hid it in an old engineering textbook where I wouldn't have to see it every day. But I always knew it was there. Spring 1968, 3 years after Catherine. I was 24 years old, working long hours at the firm, living in a small apartment in Manhattan. I was functional, successful even, but I was hollow. My friend Tom invited me to his wedding in Connecticut. I almost didn't go. I hated weddings by that point. They felt like mockeries of what I'd lost. But Tom was persistent, and I figured I owed it to him. That's where I met Margaret. Margaret Ann Crawford. She was one of the bridesmaids, a friend of Tom's fiancée from college. She was 23 years old, wearing a pale pink dress, and she had this quiet presence about her. Not loud or flashy, just solid, grounded. We ended up sitting together at the reception. She was a second-grade teacher in Hartford. She talked about her students, the way most people talk about their own children, with this complete devotion. She told me about a kid in her class who couldn't read at the beginning of the year, and how she'd stayed after school with him every day until he could. When she talked about the moment he read his first full book, her whole face lit up. I liked her immediately. Not in that explosive, earth-shattering way I'd felt with Catherine. This was different, calmer, safer. We started dating. I'd drive up to Hartford on weekends. We'd have dinner, go to movies, take walks. She was easy to be with. No drama, no intensity, just steady companionship. She made me feel peaceful, like maybe I could stop hurting. After 6 months, I realized I hadn't thought about Catherine in a few days. That felt like progress, like maybe I was finally healing. Margaret wanted what I wanted, or what I thought I wanted: a family, stability, a normal life. We dated for a year. I proposed in the spring of 1969 on a bench in Bushnell Park. It wasn't dramatic. I just asked her, and she said yes, and we both cried a little. We got married that October. Small ceremony, just family and close friends. Margaret wore her mother's wedding dress, altered to fit. She looked beautiful. Standing at that altar, watching her walk down the aisle, I felt grateful, lucky. This was a woman who chose me, who wanted to build a life with me. I loved her. I need to say that clearly, because what I'm going to tell you next might make you think I didn't. But I loved Margaret. She was kind, patient, devoted. She made me a better person. We had Daniel in 1970, Sarah in 1972. Margaret quit teaching to stay home with them, and she was an incredible mother. Patient in ways I wasn't. I built a career, Started my own engineering consulting firm in 1975. We bought a house in Westchester with a big backyard. We took family vacations, Cape Cod in the summer, Vermont in the fall. We hosted Thanksgiving dinners. We went to our kids' soccer games and piano recitals. We built a life, a good life, a life that looked perfect from the outside. But here's the part I've never told anyone, the part that makes me feel like a fraud, a liar, a terrible husband. Not a single day went by when I didn't think about Catherine. Not one day in 48 years. I'd see something, a yellow dress in a store window, a woman with dark hair reading in a cafe, a certain shade of lipstick, and I'd think of her every single time. I'd wonder what she was doing, if she was happy, if she'd married, had children, if she ever thought about me, if that summer had meant anything to her, or if I was just a forgotten chapter in her life. I felt like I was cheating on Margaret, even though I wasn't. Not physically. I was faithful, completely faithful, for every single day of our marriage. I never contacted Catherine, never tried to find her, never even spoke her name out loud. But emotionally? God, I don't know. There was always this part of me that wasn't fully present, this corner of my heart that belonged to someone else. Margaret deserved better than that. Did she know? I've wondered about that constantly. She never said anything, never asked. But sometimes I'd catch her looking at me with this expression I couldn't quite read, like she knew I was somewhere else, even when I was sitting right next to her. We had a good marriage. We really did. We laughed together. We raised 2 wonderful kids. We supported each other through hard times, when my father died, when Margaret's mother got sick, when the business almost went under in the recession. We made love, traveled together, grew old together. We had inside jokes and shared memories and all the things that make up a marriage. But I carried this secret weight, this ghost, and I hated myself for it. I'd lie awake at night, listening to Margaret breathe beside me, and I'd think about Catherine. I'd wonder if she was lying awake somewhere too, thinking about someone from her past, or if I was just a fool, pining for a girl who'd forgotten me decades ago. The guilt ate at me. I'd look at Margaret, this woman who'd given me everything, who'd devoted her life to our family, and I'd feel like the worst person alive. She deserved someone who loved her completely, without reservations, without divided loyalties. But I also knew that what I felt for Catherine didn't diminish what I felt for Margaret. They were different kinds of love. Margaret was steady, comfortable, safe, the kind of love you build a life on. Catherine was something else, something wild and unfinished, a question mark that never got answered. In 2017, Margaret started feeling tired all the time. We thought it was just age. We were both in our 70s, but it got worse. She'd fall asleep in the middle of the day, lose her appetite, lose weight. The doctors found it in October. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. They gave her 6 months to a year. She lasted 18 months, and I was with her every single day of it. I moved a hospital bed into our living room so she could look out at the garden she loved. I learned to change IV bags, manage her medications, help her to the bathroom when she was too weak to walk. Our kids came when they could, but they had their own lives, their own families. It was mostly just me and Margaret. And you know what? In those final months, I didn't think about Catherine at all, not once. All I thought about was Margaret, making sure she wasn't in pain, making sure she knew she was loved, making sure she didn't feel alone or afraid. She died on March 14th, 2019, at 3:47 in the morning. I was holding her hand. Her last words to me were, "Thank you for being mine." I said, "Thank you for choosing me." And then she was gone. After the funeral, after everyone left, after the casseroles stopped arriving and the sympathy cards stopped coming, I was alone in our house for the first time in 48 years. And that's when Catherine came back. Not physically, but in my mind, in my heart, stronger than ever. I'd be sorting through Margaret's things, and I'd think, did Catherine get married? Did she have kids? Is she even still alive? I felt guilty about it, like thinking about Catherine was somehow disrespecting Margaret's memory, like I was proving I'd been a terrible husband all along, but the thoughts wouldn't stop. If anything, they got stronger. I spent the first year after Margaret's death just existing, going through the motions. My kids would visit, bring the grandkids. I'd smile, play with them, pretend I was okay. But inside, I felt like I was disappearing. I kept thinking about time, about how much of it I had left. I was 76 years old. Statistically, I had maybe 10 years left, maybe less, and I'd already wasted 54 years wondering about Catherine. One day in March 2024, 5 years after Margaret died, I was in my study, and I found that old engineering textbook, the one where I'd hidden the yellow flower hair clip all those years ago. I hadn't looked at it in decades, but there it was, pressed between pages about structural load calculations. The fabric was faded now, yellowed with age, but I held it, and suddenly I was 21 again, sitting by the Charles River with a girl in a yellow dress. My daughter Sarah came by that afternoon. She found me sitting there, holding that clip, crying. I hadn't even realized I was crying. She sat down next to me and asked what it was. And I told her everything, the whole story. Catherine, the summer, the letters, the 60 years of wondering. I showed her the one photograph I'd kept, hidden in that same textbook. Catherine in her yellow dress, laughing at the camera. I expected Sarah to be angry, to say I'd dishonored her mother, to call me a liar and a fraud. But you know what she said? She said, "Dad, Mom is gone. You honored her with your entire life together. You were there for her every single day, especially at the end. But you're still alive. You're 79 years old, and you've been carrying this weight for 60 years. Don't you think you deserve to know what happened to her?" I said, "But what about your mother? What about Sarah cut me off?" She said, "Mom told me something before she died. She made me promise not to tell you until the time was right. She said, 'Your father has a good heart, the best heart. If there's someone from his past he needs to find peace with, help him do it. Don't let him die with regrets.'" That conversation changed everything. For the first time in 60 years, I let myself wonder, what if I could find her? I'm not good with technology. My grandkids tease me about barely being able to send emails. But I learned. I created a Facebook account. Took me 3 hours and 5 calls to Sarah to figure it out. I searched for Catherine Bennett, Catherine Rose Bennett, Catherine Harrison, Catherine anything. I found hundreds of Catherine Bennetts. Most were too young. Some had died. None were from Philadelphia. None were the right age. I tried ancestry websites, white pages, every search engine I could find. I even went to the library and looked through old phone books from Philadelphia. Nothing. After 2 months, I was ready to give up. Maybe she died years ago. Maybe she'd moved to another country. Maybe she'd never wanted to be found. Then Sarah suggested I hire a professional researcher, someone who does this kind of thing for a living. At first I said no. It felt invasive, stalkerish. But Sarah said, "Dad, you're 81 years old. You don't have time to waste." So I hired a woman named Jennifer Chen. She specialized in finding people. I gave her everything I knew: Catherine's full name, birthday, her parents' names, the aunt's address in Boston, the summer of 1965. 3 weeks later, Jennifer called me. I remember exactly where I was, sitting on my back porch, drinking coffee, watching the birds at the feeder. My phone rang, and I saw her name on the screen. My hands started shaking so badly, I almost dropped the phone. She said, "Mr. Mitchell, I found her." Catherine Rose Bennett Harrison. She'd married someone named Robert Harrison in 1970. They'd had one daughter, Elizabeth. They'd divorced in 1989. She'd remarried briefly in 2001 to someone named Peter Chen, but he died in 2018. She was alive, 80 years old, living in a retirement community called Seaside Haven in Portland, Maine. Jennifer gave me the address. I wrote it down, but my handwriting was so shaky I could barely read it. After I hung up, I just sat there for an hour, maybe longer. My coffee went cold. The sun moved across the sky. And all I could think was, what do I do now? I called Daniel, my son, told him everything. He was less supportive than Sarah. He said I was being selfish, that I was dishonoring his mother's memory. He said, "Dad, it's been 60 years. She's probably forgotten you. And even if she hasn't, what's the point? You're both old. What do you think is going to happen?" I didn't have an answer for him. I didn't know what I thought would happen. I just knew I had to see her. I spent a week trying to figure out what to do. Should I write a letter first? Call? Have Jennifer make initial contact? Every option seemed either too forward or too cowardly. Finally, on June 3rd, 2024, I stopped thinking. I got in my car, programmed the GPS, and started driving to Maine. That 2-hour drive felt like the longest 2 hours of my life. I turned around 3 times. I'd get 10 miles down the highway, then take the next exit and head back. Then I'd turn around again. I kept thinking, what am I doing? I'm an 81-year-old man about to show up unannounced at some woman's retirement home. A woman I haven't seen in 60 years. A woman who probably doesn't even remember me. A woman who might have a heart attack from the shock. But I kept driving, because at 81 years old, you realize something. You're running out of time to answer the questions that have haunted you. Seaside Haven is a nice place. Cottages overlooking Casco Bay, gardens, walking paths, the kind of place where people go to live out their final years in comfort and dignity. I sat in the parking lot for 20 minutes. Other residents walked by. Old folks with canes, with walkers, with oxygen tanks. I watched them and thought, that's us now, Catherine and me. We're not the young people by the river anymore. We're the ending, not the beginning. Finally, I forced myself to move. I walked to the main building. There was a reception desk, flowers, soft music playing. Very pleasant. The woman at the desk, her name tag said Joyce, smiled at me and asked if she could help. I said, "I'm looking for Catherine Harrison. Cottage 17, I believe." Joyce asked if I had an appointment. I admitted I didn't. I said, Could you tell her that Edward Mitchell is here to see her?" Joyce picked up the phone. I watched her face while she made the call. She said, "Mrs. Harrison, there's an Edward Mitchell here to see you." Then she paused, and her expression changed. Her eyes went wide. She said, "Yes, ma'am, I'll send him over." She hung up and looked at me with this strange smile. She said, "Cottage 17 is down the path toward the water. She's expecting you." My hands were shaking as I walked down that path. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought I might have a heart attack before I even got there. Wouldn't that be ironic? 60 years of waiting, and I die 20 feet from her door. Cottage 17 had roses in the garden, pink ones, yellow ones. There was a white bench on the porch, and the door was painted blue. The door opened before I reached it, and there she was. She was 80 years old. Her hair was white now, not dark brown. She was smaller than I remembered, or maybe we'd both just shrunk with age. She wore glasses, a soft blue cardigan, comfortable shoes, but her eyes, God, her eyes were exactly the same. We stood there, maybe 10 feet apart, just staring at each other. Neither of us said anything for what felt like forever. I was trying to find words, any words, but my throat felt closed. Finally, she spoke. She said, "Edward, you look exactly the same, except older." I said, "So do you, except with white hair." And then, I don't know who moved first, we were holding each other. This 81-year-old man, an 80-year-old woman, standing on a porch in Maine, holding each other like we were drowning. She was crying. I was crying. I could feel her shaking, or maybe I was the one shaking. We didn't say anything. We just held on. When we finally pulled apart, she looked at me and smiled, that same smile from 60 years ago, and she said, "I knew you'd find me. Somehow, I always knew." We sat on that bench on her porch, and we talked. We talked for 6 hours straight. She made tea. I still don't really like tea, but I drank 3 cups. We ordered dinner from the community dining room, and we told each other everything. She told me about her father's illness, how it had lasted months, not weeks, how her mother had become overprotective, frightened of losing anyone else, how her mother had been reading our letters. Catherine said, "My mother intercepted your last letter, the angry one. I never received it. I didn't know you thought I'd abandoned you so easily. All I knew was that you'd stopped writing." I said, "But I stopped because you asked me to, because you sent my ring back." She looked at me, confused. She said, "I sent your ring back? Edward, I wore that ring on a chain around my neck for 40 years. I still have it. It's in my jewelry box." That's when we realized what had happened. Her mother had written that letter, forged Catherine's handwriting, had taken my ring from Catherine's jewelry box and replaced it with an exact replica and sent it back to me. Catherine said, "After you stopped writing, I thought you'd moved on, forgotten me. I was devastated. I wrote you a dozen letters, but I never sent them because I thought you didn't want to hear from me." 60 years. We lost 60 years because of one woman's fear and interference. Catherine told me she'd married Robert Harrison in 1970. It was a practical marriage. Her mother pushed for it, said Robert was stable and successful. Catherine said, "I married him because I thought you were gone, because I thought I'd lost my chance at real love." They had a daughter, Elizabeth, but the marriage was cold. They divorced in 1989. Catherine said, "I tried to love him the way I loved you, but I couldn't. It wasn't fair to either of us." She'd remarried briefly. A man named Peter Chen, a widower she'd met at a writing group. She said, "Peter was kind. We had 6 good years together before the cancer took him. I cared about him deeply, but I never stopped thinking about you." I told her about Margaret, About my kids, my grandkids, my career? And I told her the truth, that I'd thought about her every single day for 60 years. She started crying again. She said, I thought I was crazy. I thought it was wrong to carry you in my heart while married to someone else. I felt so guilty. I said, so did I, every single day. We sat there, two old people who'd loved each other when they were young, realizing that we'd both spent our entire lives haunted by the same ghost. Catherine said something that night that I'll never forget. She said, we lost 60 years, Edward, but maybe we needed those 60 years. Maybe we needed to live those lives, love those people, raise those children. Maybe we needed to become who we are now to really understand what we had together. I said, do you really believe that? She said, I have to believe it. Otherwise, it's just tragedy. And I don't want our story to be a tragedy. I started visiting her 3 times a week. I'd drive up from Westchester to Portland, 2.5 hours each way. We'd walk along the bay, have dinner, talk about everything. Books, politics, our families, our regrets. My kids had different reactions. Sarah was thrilled. She'd helped me find Catherine in the first place, so she felt invested in the outcome. But Daniel was angry. He said I was disrespecting his mother's memory, that Margaret deserved better than to be forgotten the moment someone else appeared. We had some terrible arguments, Daniel and I. He said, you're being selfish, Dad. Mom gave you everything, and now you're acting like she meant nothing. I said, your mother meant everything to me. Everything. But she's gone, Daniel, and I'm still here, and I have a chance, maybe the last chance, to answer a question that's been killing me for 60 years. He didn't speak to me for 2 months after that. Catherine's daughter Elizabeth was conflicted too. She'd watched her mother alone for so long, and she wanted her to be happy. But she also felt protective. She said to Catherine, Mom, you barely know this man anymore. He's a stranger. Are you sure about this? Catherine told me. I said to her, he's not a stranger. He's the person I've known longest, even though I haven't seen him. 3 months after our reunion, in September, I brought Catherine back to our bench. Not the one by the Charles River. That was too far, and we're both too old for that kind of trip. But her bench, on her porch in Portland. We were sitting there, watching the sunset over the bay, and I got down on one knee. Well, I tried to. My knees don't bend like they used to, so it was more like a controlled collapse. Catherine started laughing, then crying, then laughing and crying at the same time. I said, Catherine Rose Bennett, 60 years ago I asked you to marry me. I'm 81 years old now, and I'm asking again. Will you marry me? She said, you foolish, wonderful man. Yes, God, yes. We got married on October 15th, 2024. Small ceremony at the cottage. Both our families came. Even Daniel, though he barely spoke to me. Sarah stood as my best man, which made me cry. Elizabeth walked Catherine down the path to where I was standing. Catherine wore a soft yellow dress, not the same one from 1965. She'd long since thrown that away, but yellow with white flowers. And I wore my class ring again, the one I'd given her all those years ago. We said our vows, and I kept thinking, we're 81 and 80 years old. Statistically, we have maybe 5 or 10 years left together. That's nothing compared to what we lost, but it's everything compared to what we thought we'd have. We've been married 14 months now. We live in her cottage in Portland. My kids visit. Sarah weekly, Daniel occasionally. though he's warming up slowly. Elizabeth comes by almost every day. We have a routine now. We wake up early. Old people's bladders, you know. We have coffee on the porch. We take slow walks along the bay. We read to each other. We talk about our grandkids, our lives, everything we missed. And here's the controversial part. The part that's going to make some of you hate me. I love being married to Catherine. I love waking up next to her. I love the way she still sees colors more vividly when she's happy. I love that we get this second chance, this impossible gift at the end of our lives. But I also still love Margaret. I think about her every day. I see her in my children's faces, in the way Daniel crosses his arms when he's annoyed, in the way Sarah tilts her head when she's listening. Margaret is woven into every part of my life, and Catherine knows that. People ask me, how can you love two women? How can you honor one while being with the other? And I say, the heart is bigger than we think it is. Love isn't a finite resource. Loving Catherine doesn't diminish what I felt for Margaret. They were different loves for different seasons of my life. Margaret was my anchor, my stability, the person who built a life with me, who gave me children, who stood by me through everything. She made me a better man. Catherine is my what if, my unfinished symphony, the question that finally got answered. She makes me feel like I'm 21 again, even though my body reminds me daily that I'm not. Do I regret the 60 years we lost? Every single day. I think about the life we might have had together, the children we might have raised, the adventures we might have shared, the decades of waking up next to each other. But I also know that those 60 years shaped us. Margaret taught me about steady love, about commitment, about being a father. Catherine's experiences, her failed marriage, her career as a writer, her own struggles, made her wiser, more compassionate. We're not the same people we were at 21. Maybe we needed to become these people to really appreciate what we have now. Last week, Catherine and I were sitting on our bench, watching the sunset. She took my hand. Our hands are wrinkled and spotted now, covered in age spots, veins showing through thin skin. Not the smooth young hands that touched over scattered nails in a hardware store. But the feeling is the same. That electricity, that recognition, that sense of coming home. She said, "Do you think Margaret would be okay with this? With us?" I said, "Margaret told me before she died, 'Don't spend your life mourning me. Live.' She wanted me to be happy. And right now, sitting here with you, I am." Catherine squeezed my hand. She said, "Peter said something similar before he died. He said, 'You've been alone in your heart for too long. If you get a chance at happiness, take it.' So here we are. Two 80-year-olds who found each other again after 60 years. Two people who loved other people, who built other lives, who carry the weight of all those years. Some people think this is beautiful. Sarah cries every time she visits and sees us together. She says it's the most romantic thing she's ever witnessed. Other people think it's wrong. Daniel still struggles with it. He says, "Dad, how am I supposed to feel? You're telling me you were thinking about another woman my entire life. Was any of it real?" And I don't have a good answer for him. I say, "Yes, it was all real. Every moment with your mother was real. Every birthday party, every Christmas morning, every family vacation. I was present. I was your father. I loved your mother." But I also can't lie and say Catherine wasn't always there in the background of my mind. Is that wrong? I don't know. I genuinely don't know. I'm 81 years old. I have maybe 5 years left, maybe 10 if I'm lucky. Catherine has about the same. We know our time is limited. We know we're living in the epilogue, not the story, but we're grateful for it every single day. Yesterday, Catherine showed me something. She opened a drawer in her desk and pulled out a box. Inside were my letters from 1965, all of them, every single one I'd written that summer. She'd kept them for 60 years, moved them from apartment to apartment, house to house, through 2 marriages and countless life changes. She said, I couldn't throw them away. They were proof that it had been real, that I hadn't imagined it. I said, I kept yours too, in a box in my closet. Margaret never knew they were there. We sat there, 2 old people reading love letters written by 2 young people who barely exist anymore. And we cried for what we lost, for what we found, for how strange and complicated and painful and beautiful life is. So here's the question I'm leaving you with, because I don't have an answer. Was I a good husband to Margaret? I tried to be. I was faithful, present, committed. I raised our children, built our life, held her hand when she died. But I also carried someone else in my heart the entire time. Does that make me a cheater, even though I never acted on it? And now that I'm with Catherine, am I dishonoring Margaret's memory? Or am I finally being honest about who I am? I don't know. I really don't. All I know is this. I loved Margaret. I love Catherine. Both of those things are true. I lived a good life with Margaret. I'm living a good life with Catherine. Both of those things are true. I have regrets about the 60 years we lost. I don't regret the lives we lived in those 60 years. Both of those things are true. Life is complicated. Love is complicated. The human heart is vast and contradictory and capable of holding more than we think possible. I'm not asking for forgiveness or understanding. I'm just telling you what happened, what's still happening. 2 old people who found each other again at the very end, trying to make peace with everything that came before. Catherine says we should be grateful for the time we have, not bitter about the time we lost. She's probably right. She usually is, but late at night, when I can't sleep, I still think about those 60 years, about the life we might have had, about the children with her eyes and my stubbornness, about growing old together from the beginning, not just at the end. And then I look over at her, sleeping next to me, and I think, but we're here now. Against all odds, despite everything, we found our way back. Is it enough? Can 5 years at the end compensate for 60 years lost? I don't know. But it's what we have, and I'm grateful for it. My name is Edward Mitchell. I'm 81 years old. I love 2 women in my life. I love them still. And I'm trying to make peace with what that means. Thank you for listening to my confession. Judge me if you need to. I've been judging myself for 60 years. But if you take anything from my story, let it be this. Don't wait. Don't let fear or pride or other people's expectations keep you from the truth of your own heart, because time runs out. It always does. And regret is the heaviest thing you'll ever carry.